The greens and the herbs that were in the goodies are from the farm, from our 3.5-acre organic farm. I'd also like to thank Doug Abrams, Far West Fungi, Shmuel Thaler, who is back there, Taylor Boone, who is videotaping our talks tonight, all of our volunteers, and all of you for coming out. Thank you. And now I'd like to ask if you are a board member, this is going to be like a stand-up exercise, and I'm hoping that once you stand, that you stay standing until everybody sits down. So if you're a board member, please stand up. And then if you are on staff or are a trainee in our program, please stand up. If you are a volunteer, please stand up. Thank you all. We have such an amazing community. I hope that you will stop by our store at 1338 Pacific Avenue during our expanded holiday hours. We're open every day from 11 to 7 through December 24th. Join us for First Friday tomorrow night with the First Friday artist, incredible nature photographer Paul Zaretsky, remarks from Mayor Sonia Brunner and from the incoming Mayor Fred Keeley at 6 p.m. And you can also see our wreath-making process in action tomorrow night at the store. During the holidays, we celebrate the circle of the seasons, the abundance of the harvest, the visible and tangible fruits of our trainees' labor, and also the meaningful personal changes trainees are making, both large and small, on their transition into the workforce. We celebrate our trainees' generosity and support of one another, and their pride in seeing their wreaths at the store, or even better, seeing that it's sold. The holidays are a time for us to celebrate our partnership with our community, with all of you. And I hope that you can see how vital you are to making the vision of the Homeless Garden Project real. We have the vision statement. We envision a thriving and inclusive community, workforce, and local food system. And all of us on staff feel great joy and inspiration in working alongside our trainees and getting to be a part of this process of change. And we've put together this event tonight as a way to share that inspiration with you that we get every day by working with our trainees, and sort of give it back to you as a gift. So here's how the evening's going to go. We're going to hear from our trainee, Doug King, in just a moment about his experience in our program. Then we're going to watch the film Mission Joy, based on the Book of Joy. And then I'll be joined on stage with Doug Abrams, the author of the Book of Joy, for a conversation about the book and about the experience of making the film. And then after that, there will be more opportunities for mingling and introduction trainee. And he has a quiet, peaceful, gentle way He works really hard and gets things done. He is really gained our trust and our caring and our respect. And he's extremely kind and dedicated. And I've really learned that when Doug speaks that I should pay attention because his words are full of heart and of truth. And I'm gonna just stop talking and ask him to come up, and please welcome Doug King.
Hello, my name is Doug. I have been at the Homeless Garden Project since June. I grew up on the East Coast and have a construction and restaurant background. I moved to California about 10 years ago, and even though I had experience, it was hard for me to find work. The Homeless Garden Project gets people from all different backgrounds, and on the farm we come together as a team. Also, we celebrate each other's successes and accomplishments. I have had a couple of personal accomplishments, such as being asked to take the lead on watering the farm, which added some extra responsibility to my normal day-to-day tasks. Also, I was considered for the position of production trainee, then interviewed. I was successful and got the job. In this position, I get to operate with more independence, but I'm also stepping up as a leader on some tasks. It's a one-year commitment, and I'm looking forward to learning as much as possible. The Homeless Garden Project is an employment training program that helps people in Santa Cruz County who are experiencing homelessness, who have barriers to employment, and who wish to maintain a productive place in their community by providing a stable place to grow, not only as an employee, but as a person. The Homeless Garden Project nourishes the mind, body, and soul. Having a stable income has allowed me not only to meet my basic needs, but through budgeting, I've been able to plan for the future. I was recently able to replace my phone when my old one broke. Through my savings, that wouldn't be possible without a job. I get a sense of security through working, which allows me to keep a positive mental attitude, and this brings me peace of mind. It all starts with Morning Circle. Morning Circle begins with 3 minutes of meditation. It's a great time to get grounded and set an intention for the day. Also, it's nice to experience a quiet time. We don't always get that. On Tuesday, we have check-in and are presented with a question such as, what's the best advice you've been given? The best advice I have ever been given is treat others as you would wish to be treated. We then move on to announcements before farm tasks are handed out for the day. On Tuesday and Friday, we harvest vegetables and flowers for our community-supported agriculture recipients. We take great joy in providing the freshest possible produce, so we harvest the morning of, selecting only the best, and we process on site. The cycle of life all begins with the greenhouse, where we mix our own potting soil into which we sow the seeds of our crop to be. Once the seeds are sown, they are nurtured in the greenhouse until they are mature enough to plant into our beds that we have prepared by hoeing the weeds, adding compost, and loosening the soil so the roots have room to thrive. When the beds are planted, there is lots of standard bed maintenance to do, such as hoeing the weeds, irrigating, fertilizing, also covering with row cloth to try to mitigate pest damage. Deer are a big problem and they love strawberries, so to deal with them, we put up a fence and now we don't need to worry. We are also provided a hot organic lunch, sourcing as much from the farm as possible, the hot portion being prepared by a volunteer and the salad by rotating trainees. The food is always excellent. You can taste the love that goes into making it. Then once a week we meet with our social work intern to set goals and work together to accomplish them. We also meet with the training education supervisor every 2 months to go over milestones where we set goals and go over the ones we've accomplished. Milestones are a trackable checklist of skills that we use to make sure we are ready for employment when we graduate. Employers from the community make presentations to let us know what they look for in applicants and tell us what the company is all about, which may expand our job horizons. In addition, we receive 14 weeks of interactive job search training and resume writing classes to help us develop our job search skills and find employment when our training is over. This also helps our computer literacy skills. We get a strong sense of purpose and gain skills from the jobs we perform on the farm, such as strength to persevere, reliability, dependability, and responsibility. We also gain problem-solving skills by asking questions, overcoming obstacles like pest control, water management, and a constant struggle with weeds. We learn teamwork skills such as communicating, learning, and having a positive mental attitude. I get my motivation just by having my hands in the soil of an organic farm, knowing that I'm helping to nourish people. Just like I help to nourish the plants and help them grow, in return the farm nourishes me and helps me grow. Thank you.
Just really want to thank Doug for stepping up to do that talk. He worked hard on writing that, and just really appreciate all of the thought that went into it, and for showing up tonight to share that talk with all of you. And I think we're going to roll the film now. That was just so beautiful. So beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's really fun to share with the hometown crowd.
Darrie, you have to tell him we are all sitting here so envious.
So I just want to share that I'm having a little trouble with my vision, but I am doing the best I can with it. So I just want to introduce Doug, and then I have a few questions for Doug. And I really believe a lot in giving context. So I spent some time, and I'm going to say quite a bit about Doug.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So Doug Abrams is an author, editor, literary agent, and truth hunter who is committed to helping catalyze the next evolutionary stage of our global culture. Am I okay with the mic? Okay. Thanks. In addition to co-writing the Book of Joy with the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu, he also worked with Stephen Hawking on his last book, the global bestseller, Brief Answers to the Big Questions. He has had the privilege of working with other Nobel laureates, including Nelson Mandela, Jody Williams, and Elizabeth Blackburn. Doug has worked with many visionary scientists and is devoted to spreading the importance of conservation and fighting climate change. He has worked with Desmond Tutu as his co-author, editor, and literary agent for almost 2 decades. Doug is the founder and president of Idea Architects, a creative book and media company helping visionaries to create a wiser, healthier, and more just world. Prior to founding Idea Architects, Doug worked at the University of California Press, as well as at Harvard, San Francisco, where he served as a senior editor. Doug has worked on a wide variety of books and films, including Just Mercy, The Bridge Betrayed, and Disposable People.
Disposable people.
Ah.
About modern slavery.
I wondered about that. He worked with Christiana Figueres on The Future We Choose, Ending the Climate Crisis, and with plant ecologist Suzanne Samar on Finding the Mother Tree. He's written 2 novels, The Lost Diary of Don Juan and Eye of the Whale, which together have been translated into over 30 languages. Throughout all of his wide-ranging projects, Doug aspires to help build a prism through which life-changing conversations and experiences can be created and nourished. He was on the founding team of JustGive.org, a philanthropy website that pioneered new forms of giving and has been responsible for giving over $500 million to charity. Doug lives with his wife, Rachel, an integrative family physician, author, and lifelong conversation partner. They have 3 grown children, Jesse, Kayla, and Eliana. And we are so fortunate to have Doug live right here in our own community.
Represent.
In the film, you did sort of talk the whole idea, but I want to know a little more. Can you talk a little bit more about the origins of this book, and does it go back, can you trace it all the way back to being a child, and why about joy?
Well, so yeah, there's some fun stories to tell about when we were in South Africa about, and if this buzzes, I can just shout. When we were at Arch's office, and like all good things, this book project started with sandwiches, and we were eating sandwiches, and the Dalai Lama's chairman of this foundation said, should we do this book project with the 2 of them, or what do you think about a book project with the 2 of them? And then, we said that thing about, wow, it should be about joy. And so I turned to Arch and I said, hey, Arch, you want to do a book project with the Dalai Lama? And he turned back and he said, I'd do anything with that man. And so I got to meet with the Dalai Lama before we went to Dharamsala in Washington, D.C. And when we sat down, he said, when I got Arch wrote him a letter about the book project. He said, when I got the letter, I got a little excited. And so I think, if you're making the Dalai Lama a little excited, you're doing something. But to answer your question more personally, I wonder if we even need these.
Yeah, you do.
They're
Thank you.
Yeah.
They're working on it.
They're working on it,
Yeah.
okay. So, I got a very loud voice, so I know it's not me. But, when I grew up in New York City as a kid.
Yeah, I know, that's the problem.
So sorry about
Big problem I
that.
have with everybody.
I grew up in a very loving home, but with a mom who suffered from depression. And I think I learned very young that so much suffering happens within the human mind. And when I was 7 years old, I think, channeling some of her depression, witnessing some of her suffering, also having dyslexia and ADHD, and having trouble in school. I was one leg over the balcony of our 20th floor apartment in Manhattan, and I was really faced with this choice of whether I wanted to stick around. And you can't hear. Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry. There's options of silence or hissing. It's a hard choice. My mother looked at me from the window, and I realized that she couldn't get to me in time to stop me, and that I had to make the choice whether to stay. And I think when I was in Dharamsala the night before we were supposed to start, I got woken up like as if I were shaken at 3 o'clock in the morning. And the Dalai Lama gets up to pray and meditate at 3 o'clock in the morning every day. I only get up when my demons get me up. And the demon that got me up was the demon of self-doubt. And I was like, who am I to do this? How am I possibly going to facilitate this conversation between these 2 great masters that you heard in the film? And I went out onto the balcony of that hotel in Dharamsala, and I was transported back to that balcony of my childhood. And I realized that my entire life's work has been about seeking an understanding of human happiness and how we confront suffering and how we find hope and how we give people choice so that we individually and collectively can choose to create lives that are filled with more joy more justice.
Okay, how's this? Is that good? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Doug. So this one is an audience participation that you sit quietly in your chair with this one. And this question is, what are you doing when you're most joyful? And I really want to ask you to take a minute and think about that. And then we'll hear from Doug about that. Is that enough time?
Yeah, yes,
Yeah.
for sure. So 3 things came to mind. One I can't talk about in this public company, but it's related to the second one, which is about being with loved ones and friends. And, you know, I think what you see in the film is just the gorgeous example of what is possible for unconditional love between 2 human beings. And I think as we touch that love with the people in our lives, that is, you know, as they said, our greatest joy. And then, because I live in Santa Cruz, the third that came to mind was anything having to do with a wave, being in the water.
So then the next question is kind of getting a little more academic about the Book of Joy. And there's 8 pillars of joy that are described, 4 qualities of the mind. Am I echoing again? Okay. And 4 qualities of the heart. And do you want me to name them, or do you want to just go through them? Or?
Sure. So it was really fascinating to hear them articulate these 8 pillars of joy, because as you heard in the film, they said that basically if you chase after joy and happiness, it's the fastest way to miss the bus. And that actually by practicing these other qualities and developing these other qualities, that's how you find true joy and happiness. And so the first one they said, which you heard in the film a lot about, was perspective. Jinpa, the Dalai Lama's translator, called it cognitive reframing, or this ability to see life and stand back and see life in its proper perspective. Because if you focus on the heartache and the heartbreak, that's basically all you see. But if you see that heartache and that heartbreak in its wider context, then it doesn't stop, but it takes its proper place. And then once you have that perspective, then you come to a sense of humility, which is a recognition that we are no better or no worse than anyone else, the 7 billion people on the planet. And that humility allows us, when you see them as like these magnificent examples of humility, and then that humility leads us to humor, was their 3rd pillar of joy. And because humor is about being able to laugh at ourselves and our extraordinarily funny humanity, right? And that's what they're just constantly doing. And I said to Arch, I said, well, look, your humor is never cutting or mean, even when he's saying, little bit of English, he's teasing him, but it's not it's not a cruel humor. And he said, well, it's kind of like stand next to me and we'll laugh at me and then we'll laugh at you. And basically what he was saying is it's really about our laughing at our shared humanity. And then that humor then leads us to acceptance, which is the ability to accept the reality of what is. And what's fascinating in the chapter title of the book is acceptance, the only place from which true change can occur. Because if you're not willing to accept the reality, you can't actually change anything. And so that acceptance of the reality that is, then, and the present reality, allows you to move into the first pillar of the heart, which is forgiveness. Which is, once you're accepting the reality that is, you are able to give up the hope of a better past and accept the reality of the past that has brought us to where we are in our life. And that's what forgiveness gives us. And as they said, it unchains us from the past. We don't actually forgive people for the person we're forgiving. We forgive them for ourselves, to free ourselves from those chains of the past. And then from that forgiveness, we naturally step into gratitude, because we've given up the hope that something should have been better than it was in our life, and we are able to be grateful for what we have in our life. And that profound sense of gratitude for everything that we've been given naturally leads us to compassion and generosity. And generosity, you heard them speak a lot about compassion. We actually thought we might need to call this the Book of Compassion, because they talk so much about compassion as central to joy, as fundamental to this quality of, and what we were interested in wasn't just like the fleeting joy of catching that really perfect wave. It was, this kind of quality of joy that is not just a state, but a trait of one's character and one's life, one's experience. And generosity is obviously generosity in money and time and counsel, as the Buddhists describe those three. But it's also a generosity of the spirit. And those 8 pillars of joy, and what you see evidenced in their way of being, is that sense of a generosity of spirit.
So I'm going to be getting a signal from our team about how much more time we have. We good? Okay.
Doug, make the answer shorter.
Yeah. I am interested in generosity and the JustGive.org platform. How did that come about?
Generosity is a good topic for our evening tonight, since we're here, because this organization is such an extraordinary gift of self to our community. The whole community that supports the Homeless Garden Project are doing and giving. And Just Give is a platform where people are able to donate their flight miles to charity, or do wedding registries, and it was a kind of way to create innovative ways for people to give. And it's overall, I think, given over $500 million to charity now.
Amazing. So I do have a few more questions. In our culture, spirituality and science are often seen as kind of working at cross purposes. And in the movie, it shows us a little bit. In the Global Joy Summit, it really came across the reverence and the respect that the scientists showed to the Dalai Lama is really impressive. And I especially saw it with Richie Davison, who's a psychologist and psychiatrist who studies the neural bases of emotion. Can you talk about how science collaborate with the Dalai Lama, and what this means to you about the relationship between science and spirituality?
Well, as you heard in the film, the Dalai Lama is very interested in science, and I love, Arch also talks about what he calls self-corroborating truth, when many disciplines point to the same aspects of reality. And really what we were in it for with the book, and what I'm in it for my work, is what is universally true for humanity. Fundamentally, religion was the place for a very long time where we asked the most profound questions of life, of what is a good life, and what does it mean, to live here, and what are we doing here, and where are we going? Those questions were asked. And then science has started to ask these questions about human happiness, and as you saw, people like Richie Davidson starting to put these questions into the MRI machines, and a fascinating study about how meditation kind of separates us from the rumination and the anticipation. And so I think that I'm very interested in bringing ancient wisdom and modern science together in a way where we can fundamentally look at the nature of being human and what it is that allows us to live lives filled with joy and possibility and create a world where there's hope and that our grandchildren deserve.
Thank you. I came across this passage about you. It says, dialogue is key to Doug's work, and he believes that genius is a collaborative process. His goal is to bring people together in a cultural conversation through books and media that transform lives and ultimately the world. Why do you think genius is a collaborative process?
Well, I think we're in the midst of a great turning in our society from the great man theory of history and the great genius theory of history that kind of individuals create history to the reality of Ubuntu, that is that we do nothing great. I mean, you are a fantastic leader of the Homeless Garden Project, but yes. But what allows this organization to be is that delicate web of human relationships and human genius that is brought together in the service of this greater goal. And I think, in the world I come from of books and media, there's this idea that, somehow you're gonna go into a cabin by yourself and bang your head against a keyboard until you write red rum, as some may remember from The Shining. And just this whole idea that somehow the individual alone is going to create a great gift to society. And it's not to say that individuals don't do extraordinary work, but really what I think, it's interesting, the word genius actually comes from genia loci, which means the genius of a place. And it's actually not something that dwells within us, it's something that dwells within the place. And like Santa Cruz has a genius that we get to participate in. And I think that's why I think that it is about that web of relationships. I mean, when I moved here in 1999, so over 20 years ago, one of the things I really was so impressed with was how many people had thought so well about how do you create a community where people can thrive. And really, as a parent of young children, there was just so much thought in, how do we create a place where families can thrive and people can thrive. And I think it's this delicate web of relationships that, I just gave a talk down in South Africa for Archbishop Tutu's peace lecture. And it was, the topic of the talk was 2 truths and 3 lies about hope and humanity. And, one of the things that we think is that hope is something personal or individual. But the reality is hope is actually contagious. Hope is a social gift that we give to one another. It's a social good. And hope can be drained from families, from communities, from nations. And it was really powerful because South Africa, like so much of the world, is going through a very rough time. And you could see, the hopelessness and the despair. And, people were cheering for that sense of recognition of the hope that we're all reaching for together, because it's so easy for us to, as the Dalai Lama said, to look at the newspaper and say, this is the nature of our humanity is violence and corruption, and there's not much hope for us. And so remembering that hope is something, this social gift and the social good that we need to protect as a community can offer to all of our citizens.
Fundamentally, the Book of Joy is about individual and personal transformation. We see the power of personal transformation at the Homeless Garden Project all the time. But can these insights and practices and tools impact the systems and structures that lead to social issues such as homelessness, income inequality, and lack of affordable housing?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that one of the things that was so powerful working with the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu these are two of the greatest social activists of the 20th century. You know, we see them here as kind of laughing holy men, but as you saw in the archival footage, I mean, these are men who have really stood in the face of injustice and created social change. And I think similarly to what we think about hope, joy is actually something that has a social component as well. And, you know, lasting joy cannot happen in one's own island, in one's own self alone, if the commons, the social, is suffering. You know, like the number one question that we got from around the world when we were gathering questions was, how can I have joy in a world so filled with suffering? And so ultimately, you know, whether we like it or not, we are these social creatures. We are these pack animals where our individual well-being, our, you know, wise selfishness is dependent on the benefit of everyone. And when we have a community that suffers from homelessness or poverty, or as I was talking to one woman, you know, the suffering of our farm workers, you know, we all, it affects all of us in more ways than we realize. And so I think that what we learn from them is that we have to actually make our, you know, Arch once said to me, he said, you have to be attractive. If you're going to fight for justice, you have to be attractive. It has to look good. You know, it has to be something fun. And it's this recognition that actually the joy that they're demonstrating is partly about their personal practice and their personal disciplines, but it's also about taking it out into the world. And one of the things I'm really interested in is, you know, how do we create the transformation that we're looking for as a recognition of, like, this is the best game in town. You know, like, the work that we're doing, we're not doing this because we're like, oh, self-flagellating, I'm gonna help people because, you know, but like, you know, this is where the greatest joy comes from.
That's definitely the case here at Homeless Garden. Okay, so this is my very last question, and then I'm going to ask someone to come up on stage. I know you have a new project. Are you talking about it? Yeah.
Just in my Santa Cruz family. So just keep this under wraps. I mean, it's like 3 days old or something. So, when I realized of this experience from the balcony to the balcony, that my life work has really been this search for human freedom and choice and joy and hope. I realized that I've had this incredible privilege to work with all of these amazing scientists and spiritual masters, that I needed to actually tell the story of that journey, and what I learned from them. And the stories behind the stories. And so it's really about the search for kind of human happiness and how we live a full human life, and from everything from the people I've worked with who have worked on sexuality and spirituality, and to people like Brian Stevenson who have worked on justice, and Christiana Figueres who did the Paris Climate Treaty, and what we learn about our relationship to nature. And I think this goes back to your question before about how we see this schism between the individual and the community, and that ultimately I think the part of the turning that we are involved with right now in our world, and what this journey has revealed to me, is that those things are indivisible, and that the cultivation of our own life and the cultivation of our own human experience is intimately connected with, and the freedom we get internally is how we can be available and show up for the work of our time. And doing the work of our time is actually how we craft our soul on the anvil of human experience.
Well, when that project is published, I would be so honored to have another conversation with you.
Super fun. Come back.
So I'd like to invite our board president, Carrie Macer, to come up on stage. And I'm so grateful to Carrie for her board service and for always thinking big.
I want to say thank you all for being here, for supporting the Homeless Garden Project. I see my neighbors in the audience. It's super fun to see our friends and community. It's just been a super big privilege to be with you all tonight.
I want to thank Doug for spending time with us and sharing this really inspirational movie. I just feel so lucky that between thanks to Monica, that Carrie and everyone at the Homeless Garden Project, the trainees, you're so inspiring. Just being around you guys makes me really reevaluate, like, what are we all doing here? And that you show up and you're trying to make your lives better, and we want to help you, and it's the most amazing organization, and there's so many ways to give. This is my job. I get to talk about money. You can open your wallets and give. You can also give your time, though. There's a lot of ways that you can participate in our organization that don't take deep pockets. So any way that you can help us out, we would really appreciate it. We're trying to make our year-end fundraising goals. We have about a couple $100,000 left to raise, and so any way that you can help, we would really appreciate it. We have a little table out there where we're going to be selling some little ornaments for way more than they're worth, but the money goes to support our trainees.
A lot of time on those.
Really helping our trainees and our staff, and we're just so lucky to have such amazing staff too. Like, these are people that have a very hard job, aren't super well compensated, and yet they come with joy in their hearts to help out every day. And so I'm hoping that we can all spread a little bit of that this evening. So thanks everyone for coming. What a great community, and how lucky we are to have each other. And I really appreciate you all joining us this evening.
Thank you.